stand at the 50-yard line of the high school football field in Kilgore, Texas. Look around. Friday night bleachers, painted end zones, a scoreboard, a press box, a flagpole, the smell of cut grass and hot asphalt. An ordinary East Texas town doing ordinary East Texas things. But under that grass is one of the largest oil fields ever found in the United States. And it is still pumping. Most of the people who walk across that field every week have no idea they are standing on top of it. So, how does a field this large sit half forgotten under a Texas town for almost 100 years? And what does it still hold now? Start with the size, because the size is the whole story. 4 billion barrels of oil. That is enough to cover everything the entire United States burns through in close to 9 months. Every car, every truck, every plane, the whole country, for the better part of a year, out of the ground under one small town and its neighbours. More than 30,000 wells have been drilled into it. That is more holes in the ground than most oil-producing countries have ever sunk in their entire history. It spreads across about 220 square miles and 5 different counties. That is a slab of Texas roughly the size of the city of Chicago, except instead of a city on top, it is farmland, pine trees, churches, and schools. And the oil itself sits only about 3,500 feet down. Shallow, by oil standards. Close enough to the surface that a broke old man with broken down equipment could reach it. Which is exactly what happened. Then, in 1930, a man named Columbus Marion Joyner changed everything. He was around 70 years old, nearly out of money, and the big company geologists had looked at his land and told him flat out there was no oil under it. He had already drilled 2 holes and got nothing. He drilled a third anyway, on a farm belonging to a widow named Daisy Bradford, with a self-taught driller named Ed Laster running the rig and a man calling himself Doc Lloyd, a travelling salesman dressed up as a geologist, drawing the maps. In October 1930, that third hole, the Daisy Bradford number 3, blew oil clean over the top of the derrick. The men everyone had laughed at had just opened the largest oil field in the lower 48 states. And then the real madness began. In Texas, the law followed something called the rule of capture. Whoever pumps the oil owns it, no matter whose land it sat under to begin with. So every landowner started drilling as fast as they could, terrified that a neighbour's well would quietly drain the oil out from under their feet. Then, within a single year, Kilgore went from a fading cotton town of a few hundred people to a boom town of more than 10,000. Derricks went up in front yards. Derricks went up beside the church. One crew drilled a well straight down through the floor of the Kilgore National Bank. Fortunes were made overnight. The wooden towers stood so close together their legs almost touched. There is one piece of ground in downtown Kilgore that tells the whole story. They called it the world's richest acre. On a single patch about 1.25 acres, crews packed in 24 separate oil wells. One nearby city block held 44. Picture the rock down there as a giant buried sponge, sandstone, soaked through with oil, about half a mile beneath the streets. Everyone was stabbing straws into the same sponge at once, all squeezing as hard and as fast as they possibly could. And here is what makes the field so easy to forget today. Almost all of those wooden derricks came down by the 1960s. Walk through Kilgore now and you see a quiet town with a handful of steel replica derricks left standing as monuments, lit up with stars every Christmas. The forest of towers is gone. The sponge is not. It is still down there. Under the bank, under the church, under the streets, under the football field. So, why didn't they pump that sponge dry the moment they found it? And what made this one Texas field rewrite the way America controls oil forever? Because squeezing the sponge that fast nearly ruined it. All those wells pumping at once flooded the market with far more oil than anyone could buy. The price collapsed. Crude that had sold for around $1 a barrel crashed to 13 cents and then down to 10. At the same time, the pressure inside the field, the natural force that pushes oil up a well, dropped by 130 pounds. The sponge was going flat, and the men squeezing it were going broke. Then, in 1931, the state stepped in with soldiers. The Texas Railroad Commission tried to cap how much each well could pump, a system called proration, which is really just a fancy word for rationing the oil. A federal court threw the cap out. So Governor Ross Sterling declared martial law over 4 East Texas counties, sent in the Texas National Guard, and ordered every single well in the field shut down until order could be restored. It took years of court fights, and finally a federal law in 1935, the Connolly Hot Oil Act, to make the limits hold. Out of the chaos under Kilgore came the system that rationed American oil production for decades, and the field was not done shaping history. Then, in the 1940s, that same oil helped fuel the Allied side of the Second World War, moving north and east to keep the ships and tanks and planes running. A widow's farm, a fake geologist, and a hole nobody believed in had grown into one of the engines of a world war. But the part that actually keeps the field alive today is quieter, and almost nobody talks about it. Starting in 1942, operators began doing something clever. Instead of letting the sponge go flat, they took the salty water that comes up out of the ground with the oil and pumped it right back down into the rock to hold the pressure up. They are still doing it. Every single day, close to 900,000 barrels of water go back down into that sponge to keep it firm enough to give up its oil. That is why a field discovered during the Great Depression is still producing in the age of smartphones. It has been kept deliberately and carefully from ever going flat. And that is the real reason a field this size can hide under a high school. No gusher anymore, no forest of towers, just water going quietly down and oil coming quietly up. Under the end zones and the parking lot and the pine trees, the way it has for almost a century. Whether it has a real second act, whether new techniques can wring out the billion-plus barrels the rock is still believed to hold, depends on the same 2 things it always has: price and pressure. The derricks are gone. The crowds are gone. The oil never left. It is just quieter now, under the grass, waiting to see if anyone comes back for it.